Welcome to William Dathan Holbert, the chameleon killer of Central America. Lynn Hughes and Bo Eisler were an adventurous and free-spirited couple from the United States. They decided to leave behind their mundane lives and embark on a journey to Central America, drawn by the allure of exotic landscapes and the promise of adventure. In 2007, Cheryl and Bo arrived in Panama, where they sought a fresh start. Their paths would tragically cross with William Dathan Holbert, who was operating under the guise of a real estate developer and offering properties to unsuspecting expatriates. Holbert, who had a history of violence and criminal activity, saw an opportunity in the young couple's naivety. He lured them into a real estate deal, convincing them to invest their savings in a property located in a remote area near the town of Bocas del Toro. Little did Cheryl and Bo that this transaction would be the beginning of a nightmare. As Cheryl and Bo settled into their new home, they remained unaware of Holbert's true intentions. He had sinister plans for the property, which included murdering the couple and taking possession of their assets. One fateful day, Holbert carried out his cold-blooded plan. He ambushed Cheryl and Bo at their remote property. Overpowering them with violence, he bound them and subjected them to hours of torment and fear. Ultimately, Holbert brutally murdered the young couple, leaving their lifeless bodies on their own property. After the gruesome murders, Holbert buried Cheryl and Bo in shallow graves on their property, concealing the evidence of his heinous crimes. To further his scheme, he assumed their identities, using their passports, credit cards, and other personal belongings to access their assets and live off their wealth. Holbert's reign of terror did not stop with Cheryl and Bo. He continued his murderous spree, targeting other expatriates and acquaintances who had become suspicious of the couple's sudden disappearance. The bodies of his victims were often buried on their own properties or in remote locations. It wasn't until 2010 that Holbert's gruesome crimes were exposed. Panamanian authorities, suspicious of the growing number of missing expatriates, launched an investigation that eventually led them to the killer. In July 2010, William Dathan Holbert and his then-wife, Laura Michelle Reese, were arrested and charged with multiple counts of murder. William Dathan Holbert, infamously known as Wild Bill, is a serial killer whose criminal activities were centered in Central America, particularly Panama and Costa Rica. Born on February 17, 1975, in Hendersonville, North Carolina, Holbert's life journey took a sinister turn, eventually earning him a place among the most notorious serial killers operating in the region. Holbert's early life appeared relatively unremarkable. He grew up in North Carolina, coming from a seemingly ordinary background. However, signs of trouble emerged as he reached adulthood. Holbert faced a series of legal issues, including arrests for theft, burglary, and fraud. In the early 2000s, Holbert decided to leave the United States and seek a new life in Central America. He arrived in Panama and later made his way to Costa Rica. It was in these countries that he began to exploit his charisma and manipulation skills to deceive and victimize expatriates and tourists. Holbert posed as a real estate developer, enticing foreigners with promises of affordable properties in paradise-like settings. Unbeknownst to his victims, Holbert's true intentions were far more sinister. He saw an opportunity to exploit expatriates' naivety and take possession of their assets, ultimately resorting to violence and murder. One of Holbert's most notorious crimes involved the murder of Cheryl Lynn Hughes and Bo Eisler, a young American couple who had come to Panama seeking adventure and a new life. Holbert lured them into a real estate deal and subsequently murdered them, burying their bodies on their own property. He then assumed their identities to access their assets. Holbert's murderous spree did not end with Cheryl and Bo. He targeted other expatriates who had become suspicious of the couple's sudden disappearance or had crossed his path. His victims often met gruesome fates, and their bodies were hidden on their own properties or in remote locations. In 2010, Panamanian authorities launched an investigation into the growing number of missing expatriates. This investigation eventually led to Holbert's arrest. He was charged with multiple counts of murder and faced justice for his heinous crimes. William Dathan Holbert, known as Wild Bill, is a serial killer with a complex and disturbing history. Are some intriguing and unsettling facts about him? Holbert didn't just kill his victims. He assumed their identities to access their assets. This macabrist allowed him to live off the wealth of those he had murdered, making him a truly unique and devious killer. Holbert was not acting alone in his crimes. His then-wife, Laura Michelle Rees, was an accomplice in many of his murders. She participated in the killings and played a role in concealing the evidence. Holbert preyed on the trust of expatriates and tourists who came to Central America seeking adventure and a fresh start. His charismatic persona and promise of affordable real estate lured his victims into his web of deceit. For several years, Holbert managed to evade capture by frequently changing locations and adopting different aliases. His ability to blend in with the transient community made it difficult for law enforcement to track him. The exact number of Holbert's victims remains uncertain, but it is believed to be at least 5. His victims included expatriates who had crossed his path and become suspicious of his activities. Holbert often buried the bodies of his victims on the properties they owned or rented. This grim tactic allowed him to remain undetected for an extended period. Holbert's trial in Panama garnered significant media attention, both locally and internationally, due to the shocking nature of his crimes and the involvement of foreign victims. After his capture, Holbert was extradited to Panama, where he faced trial and was ultimately convicted of multiple murders. His extradition marked a significant step in seeking justice for his victims. Holbert's case has been studied by psychologists and criminologists to better understand the motivations and behaviors of individuals who exploit trust for financial gain and resort to extreme violence. Holbert's crimes sent shockwaves through the expatriate communities in Central America, leading to increased caution and vigilance among those living or traveling in the region. William Dathan Holbert's story is a chilling reminder of the capacity for deception and violence that can exist within individuals. His ability to manipulate and exploit trust for financial gain makes his case particularly disturbing and serves as a cautionary tale for those seeking adventure abroad. Thank you for exploring the dark and disturbing story of William Dathan Holbert with us.